Let's now use the local storage API in order to make the workout data persist across multiple page reloads. And let's start with a look at our flowchart so that we can see exactly what we have to implement. So basically the idea is that whenever a new workout is added, then all the workouts will be added to local storage. And so local storage is basically a place in the browser where we can store data that will stay there even after we close the page. So basically the data is basically linked to the URL on which we are using the application. So again, whenever there is a new workout, we will take the entire workouts array and store it in local storage. And then whenever the page loads, so up here in this event, then we will load all the workouts from the local storage and render them on the map and also on the list. So just like we do it when a user submits a new workout. And so like this, when you reload the page, it will then appear as if all the workouts you had previously are still in the same place. And hopefully this makes sense. And so let's now get started. And we will start with this part here. So storing all the workouts in local storage. And remember, that happens whenever the user creates a new workout. And so we have to get started in the new workout method. So down here, we need to add yet another point. So set local storage to all workouts. And here I'm actually going to create yet another method so that we can keep this method here basically nice and clean. So as you see, this new workout method here is basically a bit of a method that does delegation. So we do some stuff here, of course, but then once we're done creating the actual objects, then down here we delegate all kinds of functionality to other methods, like these ones. And now I will also create set local storage. So here I'm of course calling it already, but now I will create it afterwards. So set local storage, and once again, let's add it here at the end. And this one doesn't need any parameters because we will simply get the workouts from the workout property. And so this is how we use the local storage API. And I say API because local storage is once again an API that the browser provides for us and that we can use. So local storage dot set item, and then we have to give it a name. So workouts, and then the second argument needs to be a string that we want to store and which will be associated with this key here. So basically local storage is a simple key value store. And so we need a key, which is this one here, and we need a simple value, which must also be a string. But we can convert an object to a string by doing this. So JSON.stringify. So this is another new one. All right. But we can use this method here to convert any object in JavaScript to a string. And so what we want to convert is this dot workouts like this. And that's actually it already. With this, we are setting all the workouts to local storage. Now, I just want to mention that local storage is a very simple API. And so it is only advised to use for small amounts of data. All right. That's because local storage is blocking. And for now, you don't know what blocking actually means, but it is something that's very bad, and we will learn why that is actually in the next section. But for now, what matters here is that you shouldn't use local storage to store large amounts of data, because that will surely slow down your application. But anyway, let's already test this out, because we actually have a way of seeing this data in the browser. So let's add something here. Okay, so everything worked fine. So now let's go here to this application tab, And then here on the left side, you have this local storage tab. All right. And if we click this arrow here and then here, well, then actually it should be here already. Well, let's see if we have everything correctly set up. So we have set local storage, then set item, and here everything looks correct. And here, I believe we are also correctly calling it set local storage. So this should work. So let's simply try it again here. Okay. And now you saw it appearing here, right? So we have the key of workout and then the value. And the value is basically now this string here. So actually here it looks like an object because apparently JavaScript somehow then converts it back to an object, but actually it is stored as a string here in this workouts key. So you see that we have this single workout that we currently have, but of course if we add another one, then now we got this bigger string here. And so it now contains these two objects. And so like this, the local storage always is going to be updated. So it's up to date according to the data that we have in our application. Great. And now all we have to do is to then actually show the data back here on the list and the map once we reload the page. So let me actually show that to you, because here in the application, as you see, the local storage is still there. And so now we will make use of this by then displaying that data back in our application. So remember, when we want to do that, it is right here in the constructor, right? Because this is where we have all the code that is executed right when the application loads. So let's add that here. And I'm going to start with some comments here. Handlers. Then get users position. And then get data from local storage. And so again, I will now call a method that I'm going to create later. So get local storage. And so let's now go ahead and create this method down here in the end. And so now here we do the opposite. So local storage dot get item. And now we simply have to pass in the key. So basically the identifier of our local storage item, because we could set multiple items. So we could set everything of our application. So for example, if we wanted, we could store everything that's in the application in local storage. We would just have to define one key for each of them. And then we could use that key to basically retrieve it back. All right. So let's now store this data. And so here we can then see it for the first time. So now as the page loads, it should display this data to us in the console. And well, it's nowhere to be found. Let's reload here maybe again. So something must be wrong. Oh, and it's called workouts. And here you go. All right. So you see that indeed it is this big string. And so now we want to convert this string back to the objects. And so basically we need to use the opposite of JSON.stringify, which is JSON.parse. So let's try that again. And now indeed we get an array with some real objects in there. All right. Now there's still a problem with this, but more about that a little bit later, because all the relevant data that we need for now is actually in there. So now let's do something with that data. And the first thing that we should actually do is to check if there is actually some data. So when there is nothing in local storage, then of course the data will be like undefined. So in that case, we don't want to do anything. So let's use another guard clause here and say if there's no data, then simply return. But anyway, let's keep going. And so what we want to do with this data, which is basically our array of workouts, is to restore our workouts array. So we can say this dot workouts should be equal to the data that we just read. So keep in mind that this method here is going to be executed right in the very beginning. And so at that point, the workouts array is always going to be empty. But if we already had some data in the local storage, then we will simply set that workouts array to the data that we had before. And so essentially, we are restoring the data here across multiple reloads of the page. Okay, and so now let's take all these workouts and render them in the list. So this dot workouts, and so we want to do something for each of the workouts. And so we loop over this array, but we don't want to create a new array. And so for each is perfect for this. And now I'm going to call each of them work. And so now I can do this dot render workout, the current workout. And so now it becomes really, really helpful that we have all the logic of rendering a workout in the sidebar here nicely inside of this method, right? Because imagine that we had all this code here inside of this method here. So the new workout method, right? So if we did all of that here, then now we would have to copy that code or we would have to refactor it. But instead, you can start to get into the habit of exporting functionality into its own methods or its own functions. And so then it is very easy to reuse them, such as we are doing now with render workout. Right? So here all we do is to call render workout that we already had written before. So let's now test this. And right now we should already get the two workouts there. And indeed, here they are. So these are the two ones that we had created previously. And so we see that they did indeed now persist across loads. Now we also need to add them here on the map. And so for that, we are going to use our render workout marker method that we also already have. And let's start by actually putting it here, just so I can show you that it's actually not going to work. But then it becomes easier to explain why it doesn't work. So let's see. And so here we get cannot read property add layer of undefined. So indeed, we get an error when we try to add this first workout also to the map. So let's go back and think why that is. Well, once again, remember that this method here is executed right at the beginning. So right after the page loaded. And so we are trying to add this marker to the map right at the beginning. However, at this point, the map has actually not yet been loaded. And so essentially, we are trying to add a marker, let's say where that is. So we are trying to add this marker to the map, which is this one here, which isn't yet defined at this point. And so once again, this is a first glimpse into the nature of asynchronous JavaScript, which we will talk about in the next section. But what matters here is that you grasp this idea that the map is not yet created right at the beginning when the application is first loaded, right? It takes some time. So first, the position of the user needs to be get using geolocation. So this one here. And then after that, the map has also to be loaded. So there's a lot of stuff that has to happen before we can actually render any markers on the map. So instead of trying to render the markers right at the very beginning, we should only do that once the map has been loaded. And so we can put that logic right here in this method of load map. Okay, so here at the very end, basically. So let's get the code from down here. So I will get all of this, but I will then only keep this part. All right. So let's copy this. And so here we will not render the markers. So only the workouts on the sidebar list. And then it is here. So, yeah, right here in load map, this is where we will then render the markers, because at this point, the map is of course already available. And so with this, it should be working. Okay, but make sure that you really understand why we have to call this method here and not right in the beginning. So let's see what happens now. And we didn't get any error. And yeah, so now we have the two markers right where I had put them previously. And now let's just add another one right here. All right. And now if I reload the page, then indeed, there is the marker. And this one, and of course, all the other ones as well. Beautiful. So this is great. And our application is now essentially finished. I just want to show you one problem that we have now. And that has to do with local storage. So remember that when I click here on one of these workouts, it will move the map to the workout. And so that's going to be fine. But what also happens is that this clicks property is going to be increased by using the click method that is inherited from the workout class. But watch what happens now as I try to do that. And so we get workout.click is not a function. So why do you think that is? Well, let's try to take a look at the objects that we get back from local storage. So that's this one here. And I know that right now we have a ton of console.logs here, so we should get rid of them at some point. But anyway, for now, let's take a look at the objects that we basically have right now. And so this is currently also the data that is in this .workouts, right? Now, if we take a look at this, then here everything works okay. But now if we take a look at the prototype chain, you see that now it's no longer an object of the type of running and also not of the type of workout, right? So the entire prototype chain that we had before is gone. So contrast that to one of these objects. So again, the data is fine, but here we actually have the prototype with calc pace, and then that has the click and these set description methods in the workout prototype, right? So the problem here is that basically when we converted our objects to a string and then back from the string to objects, we lost the prototype chain. And so these new objects here that we recovered from the local storage are now just regular objects. They are now no longer objects that were created by the running or by the cycling class. And so therefore, they will not be able to inherit any of their methods. And so in the end, that's the reason why workout.click is now not a function anymore. So again, because the object now no longer has it in its prototype. So you see that this is just the regular methods that are available on any object. All right. So this can be a big problem when you work with local storage and object-oriented programming like we are doing here. Now to fix this problem, we could go ahead and restore the objects right here. So in our get local storage, we could now loop over this data here and then restore the objects by creating a new object using the class based on the data that is coming here from local storage. But that's a little bit of work, and so we're not going to do that here. And so instead, what I will do is to simply disable the functionality of counting the clicks. So remember that when I first introduced this method here, I told you that one of the reasons for it is that I also wanted to show you something in the next lecture. And so that's exactly here what I wanted to show you. So basically, that objects coming from local storage will not inherit all the methods that they did before. All right. And so with that, we are basically done. Let's just get rid of some of these console.logs here, because it's not really a good practice to have them in final code. So we can have maybe one while we're developing, but then at some point it simply clutters like our entire console workout. And so that's not helpful. And here again. And you see that here we still have all of these workouts, of course. Now, actually, to finish, I want to create a quick and easy way to delete all of these workouts at once, at least from local storage. And so let's go back here and basically add a method to the public interface of this class for the first time. So this class is a little bit unusual because right now we don't have any public method. So there's no public interface, but now we will create a reset method here, which we can then use out here or even in the console. And so actually that's what we will do. So using it in the console. So what I want to do in this one here is to basically remove this workouts item from local storage. And so besides setting and getting items, we can also remove items based on the key. All right. And with this, we removed our workouts from the local storage. And now we can then reload the page programmatically. And so then the application will look completely empty. And we can do this with location.reload. And location is basically a big object that contains a lot of methods and properties in the browser. And so one of the methods is the ability to reload the page. So let's try that now. And as I said, I will do that in the console. So let's go actually back to our code just to see where we can use it. So we are creating the app object and then storing it in app, right? And so we have access to this variable here, of course, in the console. So let's take a look at that actually. And you see that indeed, here we have these private fields. And then we have all of these methods here in the prototype. And so one of them is, of course, reset. And so let's do that. So reset. And yeah, it worked. So our application is back to being empty now so that we can add some more realistic data if we wanted to. For example, like this. Or maybe we went cycling right here, which is a really nice location. And here, let's say we took 2 hours and gained 500 meters. All right. And now, of course, everything is back to working here because we got rid of that click method. We still have some loggings here to the console, but never mind. That's not a problem. All right. But what matters here is that our application is now feature complete. We implemented everything from our flowchart. Right? So everything is done here. And so at this point, the final architecture of our application looks like this. So I have all of the methods here that we implemented in the app class and also for workout, running, and cycling. Now, I'm not going to go over this here now, but it's a good idea for you to actually check it out to get a really good idea of how the different methods call each other in our application. So these arrows that you see here are basically methods calling other methods. All right, and that's it. That's our application. I hope that you liked it and that you had as much fun as I had building it. So this was a really great experience. And now, before we actually finish this section, let's have one more final lecture where I will give you some suggestions of how to improve this application even more. So let's go there right now.